It's so wonderful to be in a room full of individuals who believe in personal transformation, true public safety, the rehabilitation and the human potential, the ability of people to change and grow. We all know that the opportunity gap in the U.S. is the cause of the achievement gap. And so through Second Chance Pell, we will provide hope and opportunity for 12,000 individuals annually. And that's quite a feat. So for those of you who are in the audience and who've been selected to be a part of this wonderful pilot, congratulations. Let's give yourselves a hand. And it's important to note that you are a select group. Over 200 colleges and universities from around the country applied, and 69 of you were selected. And importantly, you are in partnership with roughly 120 state and federal prisons. So this effort really is about a partnership between higher ed and corrections, and it's been the sort of partnership and the quality of the partnership that you will need to successfully implement it has been role modeled by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice and some of their other federal colleagues. And so it's important that today, as you work together, the reason why we gathered you all as teams, representing, again, corrections and colleges, so that you begin to build that process today of working together and learning together and building a community of practice across all 69 sites. That's the goal, that's the intent, that's the purpose today, to be celebratory, to once again congratulate you, but to also ensure that you begin to get the tools and the training and the technical assistance that you need to succeed. Indeed, it's a pilot program, and we want to ensure its success so that there's a reasonable chance, a reasonable hope that at some point we see a permanent repeal of the ban. Is that something we'd like to see, you all? Pell grants back for good. And so again, I just want to congratulate you and tell you what's ahead of you today is a wonderful program. You will see that you have been assigned to some breakout groups, and we want to make sure that the states that you follow those instructions and report to your appropriately assigned breakout group. There are some later breakout groups for which you have total choice in which ones to go, but for the assigned ones, we want to make sure that you, as your state team, go to the one that you're assigned to, because there is an issue of capacity, and we want to make sure that everyone's able to take advantage of all that we have to offer today. And with that, I'd like to introduce a great colleague from the U.S. Department of Education, Director of Policy in the Office in Octay at the U.S. Department of Ed, Lowell Tesfai.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you to Nick Turner and the entire team at the Vera Institute of Justice for making this monumentous event possible. Let's give them a round of applause. I'd also like to thank Doug Wood and the Ford Foundation for making it possible for so many of you across the United States to come here to Washington, D.C. to learn from one another and share best practices as we continue to embark on some really important work. So thank you so much to the Ford Foundation. I would also be remiss if I didn't thank our wonderful colleagues at the Department of Justice who have been wonderful partners over the last several years, and without them, this initiative would not be possible and certainly not as strong as it is. So thank you so much to the Department of Justice. And of course, I would like to thank my colleagues at the Department of Education who have worked tirelessly on this initiative over the last couple of years, everything from thinking through the policy surrounding it to designing the application to reviewing all of the applications and selecting you wonderful sites. So I would like to certainly thank the Department of Education, including John Linton, who many of you know. He was our former Director of Correctional Education and has been a champion for the restoration of Pell and post-secondary access for many years. And I know he's no longer with the department, but his legacy lives on, and so I want to thank him. And of course, thanks to all of you, we would not be here today. And I'm not just thanking you for convening here in DC in the middle of the summer, which I know is not always pleasant, but I just want to thank you for your commitment to this work. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, in 1993, when Pell grants were ultimately taken away from incarcerated individuals, 23,000 incarcerated individuals in state and federal penal institutions were receiving Pell grants out of the 4 million Pell recipients at the time. $35 million was allocated for Pell grants prior to the Pell ban in 1993, out of $6 billion for Pell grants as a whole. So that represents $6 or 6 cents for every $10 allocated to Pell. And despite the fact that we know education is monumental, despite the fact that we know it creates opportunities, unfortunately that opportunity to get affordable access to post-secondary education was taken away, and unfortunately a lot of programs have dried up. But we appreciate your commitment to this work. We appreciate you doing everything that you possibly can to ensure that the achievement gap is closed, but also that the opportunity gap is closed. And so, looking forward to the many conversations that we're going to have here today. Today is a feel-good day, but we definitely need to roll up our sleeves and do a lot of amazing work, and I'm so fortunate to be partners in this work with you. So with that, I want to thank you again and introduce Nick Turner, the president of the Vera Institute of Justice.
Good morning, everyone. Today is a feel-good day, isn't it? It's an amazing thing. Just look across this room for a moment at the hundreds of people who are here to support justice and fairness and opportunity. I was talking to the Commissioner of Corrections for the state of New Jersey, and we were reflecting a moment ago that 3 years ago we couldn't imagine a day like today and a room like today. We have accomplished so much together, philanthropy, folks from the education system, corrections, leadership on the federal level. It is really something to pause and reflect on, and it's a really important thing to pause and reflect on. Today we have had what has to be perhaps the most difficult July in the history of the world, or so it seems. We are challenged in a way I think that we have never been challenged before. It feels that way. And to be able to be in a room of 300 people who are committed to opportunity, who are committed to second chances, who are committed to fairness and committed to justice is a powerful antidote for much of what is happening in the world today, much of what is happening in this country today, which is confusing and anguishing and scary. So thanks to all of you for being here. I have the privilege to thank and introduce a few people. I would be remiss to not recognize many of the folks here from the federal government, from the education department, Joshua Skolnick, Laura Gins, Rusella Davis-Rogers, who are here in addition to Lowell, who you just heard from. From the Department of Justice, Denise O'Donnell and Amy Solomon, Brent Cohen, Ruby Quazalbash and Andre Bethea. From the National Institute of Justice, Marie Garcia, and from the Bureau of Prisons, Susan Chabot. This clearly takes a village, and we have had a village that has worked hard on this issue, and we're lucky to be co-inhabitants with you. There are funders in the room. Lowell mentioned Doug Wood, who we should all thank for this convening, but I will say as a former philanthropoid, I spent a few years in philanthropy, and Doug and his colleagues at Ford and Toya Wall from the Laughing Gull Foundation are two leaders in philanthropy on whose shoulders we stand on today. They have supported the regeneration of enthusiasm and mobilization and commitment to post-secondary education in college, in prison. That work has grown in momentum quietly in a number of states and has really been the foundation on which the work that we're doing here today is based. And oftentimes you don't see the work of philanthropy in supporting ideas that need to be invested in, that need to have an opportunity to grow quietly. And that very much is represented here, and I think we owe Doug and his colleagues a round of applause. We're also delighted to be joined by a number of corrections directors, again, from New Jersey, from Minnesota, from Pennsylvania, as well as college presidents from Ingram State Technical College, Iowa Central Community College, Jackson College, Shorter College, and then my favorite, Wiley College, because I have a 16-year-old son named Wiley, and I now know where I will send him. If we can, hook up. And he's a junior in high school. He's a little bit of an underachiever, but, we're working on that. But, the name thing might be helpful. The real pleasure that I have this morning is to introduce two remarkable individuals who are going to speak here shortly after me. Sally Q. Yates, who is the Deputy Attorney General, and John B. King, who is the Secretary of Education. I could go through, and I will very briefly just go through all of their previous offices and accomplishments, but the thing that I am struck by most is that if you were to Google either of them and read articles about them or read their bios on Wikipedia, you will know that both of these people have soul. And have passion. And they do their work, and they do it extraordinarily well. But at a time when we are called upon to reverse course on so many of the policies of the past, to embrace evidence, but also to embrace concepts that are sometimes feel airy and hard to grasp, the concepts of justice and fairness and opportunity, we really couldn't ask for two public servants who are greater than both Sally and John. Sally was appointed the Deputy Attorney General in May of 2015. She was the first woman to serve as the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia. She has done a number of things in her career. She's been a lifetime prosecutor. Well, not lifetime, but 25 years is a lifetime for some. She was appointed by the Attorney General, Eric Holder, to serve as the Vice Chair of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, and I have bumped into her in many rooms, she has led work on restrictive housing and reducing its overuse. Led work on clemency, and said something very remarkable in a profile that was done in the Washington Post, where she reflected on this role that she has as DAG at the Department of Justice, where she said, we are not the Department of Prosecution, nor are we the Department of Public Safety. We are the Department of Justice. And Sally embodies that and the meaning of justice in many ways, and so we are lucky to have her with us today. And then, of course, there is John King, who is the Secretary of Education. I was looking at John's bio, and I thought, oh, this cat must be old, because there's a lot that he has done in his life. He has a bachelor's degree in government from Harvard. He has a master's in teaching of social studies from Columbia. He has a JD from the Yale Law School, and he has a Doctor of Education from Columbia as well. And he has worked as an executive in the charter school movement. He has been the commissioner of New York State schools. He has been a deputy here in Washington and now is the secretary. And similar to Sally, he leads not only with conviction and a commitment to evidence and outcomes, but with a great deal of personal courage and character. He comes from a family of educators, having grown up in Brooklyn, and has lived that family legacy from the time he was a young person to now. So we are very blessed to have both of them with us. And I would like to invite Secretary King up to the podium, and then after that, Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is good to be here with all of you, and pleased to be in a room of people who are committed to ensuring that we as a country live up to our commitment to being a nation of second chances. I want to thank the Vera Institute for Justice and the Ford Foundation for helping to bring us together. I want to, of course, thank our colleagues at the Department of Justice who have been such wonderful partners in this work on Second Chance Pell. I can recall last summer joining my predecessor, Secretary Duncan, and Attorney General Lynch, and Broderick Johnson, who chairs the President's My Brother's Keeper task force at Jessup Prison, where we visited with the Goucher education program and announced the launch of Second Chance Pell. And less than a year later, here we are with 69 Second Chance Pell sites committing to serve 12,000 students across 28 states. We will invest $30 million in Pell Grants in these programs, and we will make a tremendous difference not only in the lives of those 12,000 students, but we have the opportunity together to demonstrate the value of this investment of Pell Grants in creating second chances for folks who are incarcerated. As I think about the importance of this work, I think about our colleague Daryl Atkinson, who many of you know. He's the Second Chance Fellow at the Department of Justice, and his life story in many ways exemplifies why this work is so important. Daryl, in 1996, pled guilty to a first-time nonviolent drug crime and spent 40 months in prison. And Daryl will tell you that in prison, he didn't have the opportunity to continue his education. That was, in a sense, lost time for him. But through the support of family, when he left prison, he was able to go to junior college, got a 4.0 at junior college, then went on to a 4-year degree program and law school with challenge, because those institutions, some of the institutions were hesitant to admit a student with a criminal record. And yet, Daryl pursued his dream with the support of his family. Went on to practice law successfully and now serves at the Justice Department and is helping lead a movement to strengthen our country. Daryl's example points to why this work is so important, the difference that we can make together by creating educational opportunities for folks who are incarcerated. We have the opportunity to help people while they're paying their debt to society also acquire the kinds of skills and education and job training that will allow them to return successfully to the community. It is better for them. It is better for our communities. It will produce safer communities. It is cost effective. And maybe one of the things that came through most powerfully to me when we were at Goucher was the difference it makes for families and children. And when we sat with the folks at the Goucher program at Jessup Prison, almost every single participant talked about the impact their pursuing their education was having on their children. They talked about telling their children about their studies. They talked about kids saying, I want to go to college just like you, because they were inspired by their father's example. We have a huge challenge as a country. We incarcerate more people than any other developed nation. We made a series of poor public policy decisions that resulted in systemic mass incarceration. And the consequences of that for children are dire. We know that children of folks who are incarcerated are more likely to struggle in school, more likely to get in trouble themselves. We can change that. We can break that pattern. We can break that cycle with the work that we are doing here today. We have the opportunity to test out a variety of educational strategies. In the room, we have folks who will take an in-person approach, folks who will take an online approach, folks who will take a blended approach. We will learn from the varied academic approaches that are taken by the institutions here. We will learn from the diversity of the programs. We have programs that will lead students to an associate's degree, programs that will lead students to a bachelor's degree, technical certificates in welding and carpentry and electrical work, non-technical certificates in areas like business administration and marketing. What we know is that the evidence supports this work. We know that the RAND study showed a 43% reduction in recidivism for participation in high-quality correctional education programs. We know there are programs in this room who have run long-standing philanthropically supported education in prison programs that have incredibly low recidivism rates because folks empowered with education and training are able to make a go of it when they return to the community, and that is how we ensure that they don't end up back in prison. The evidence that you will build, I hope, will help support a case for undoing the mistake that was made in the mid-90s to take away Pell access for folks who are incarcerated. The president proposed in his 2017 budget restoring Pell access for those who are incarcerated, and I hope the evidence that you will produce and your loud voices will help us to move that agenda forward. But we have work to do beyond just the Second Chance Pell Initiative. I want to take a moment to describe some of those efforts. We have work to do across agencies to ensure that reentry is an opportunity for success for folks. I'm pleased to be a part of a multi-agency effort. We're pleased as a department to be a part of that multi-agency effort that brings in our colleagues at Justice, at Labor, at Housing, at Agriculture, a cross-agency effort that is designed to say that when folks have paid their debt to society and are returning to the community, we should make sure that we don't put new obstacles in their way. We have to make it possible for folks to get quality housing. We've got to make it possible for folks to get access to health care. We've got to worry about issues of food insecurity for folks who are returning while they transition back. We've got to make sure that we have the sort of mental health supports and family counseling in place that will help folks make a smooth transition back. And we've got to make sure there aren't obstacles to employment. And we are working in a cross-agency way to try and change the current circumstance where too many folks who are returning find that there are so many obstacles to their successful return that they end up quickly back in prison. We also are doing work to change the reality for our young people who are in juvenile justice facilities. We worry that in too many places, juvenile justice doesn't ensure that students have access to quality educational opportunities. Together with the Department of Justice, we issued guidance more than a year ago that directed states to ensure that folks who are in juvenile justice facilities get access to quality educational programs, and particularly that students with disabilities who are overrepresented in juvenile justice facilities get access to the special education services to which they are entitled. We also pointed out that those who are in juvenile justice facilities who are ready to do college-level work can access Pell Grants to support that work. Together with the Department of Justice, we're investing $5.7 million in career tech ed focused juvenile justice transition programs that support students while they are still in the juvenile justice facility and then as they transition back to the community. We are also taking on the school to prison pipeline. Our recent civil rights data collection survey data showed that African American students in pre-K are more than 3 times as likely to be suspended as white students. Think about that, 3- and 4-year-olds suspended from pre-K already being placed on the school to prison pipeline at 3 and 4 years old. In our K-12 system, African American students are nearly 4 times as likely to be suspended from school as white students. We have nearly 3 million kids each year who are suspended from school. We are working with school systems all across the country to rethink discipline, to replace exclusionary discipline practices with restorative justice, with the kinds of mental health supports that are necessary for students who are struggling with crises outside of school. We also are working with higher ed institutions, some in this room, on our Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge. We have over 70 million Americans who have a criminal record, and yet many of our higher ed institutions create a barrier to entry right at the outset because of questions in the application that discourage folks even from applying to higher education, the kinds of obstacles that got in Daryl's way when he was pursuing his education. And so we are working with institutions that have committed to this Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge to rethink their application process, to move beyond the box, and also to rethink the kinds of services and supports they put in place for folks who've been incarcerated who are coming to their campuses. We've got to make sure at every campus that we are maximizing opportunity. Higher education has a moral mission to try to expand opportunity in this country, and we're pleased that we have 25 institutions that committed to the launch of the Fair Chance Higher Education Pledge, and I hope folks in the room will help us to expand that community. I'll end with this before turning it over to Sally. Second chances are deeply important. You were kind enough to talk about my academic record, but that almost didn't happen. I was perhaps the first Secretary of Education to be kicked out of high school. I hope I will not be the last. My mom passed away when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. I lived with my dad after my mom passed away. He was quite sick with undiagnosed Alzheimer's, and home was this very unstable, unsafe place. And after my dad passed, I moved around between schools and family members, and through all of that period, school took on this hugely important place in my life. School was the place that was consistent and where I could be a kid and where I felt nurtured and supported. But when I was a teenager, I was angry about lots of experiences that I'd had as a kid, angry about the fact that I'd been more or less on my own since I was 8. And I got kicked out of high school because I was angry at adults and angry with authority and just plain ignored the rules. And folks could have given up on me. It would have been very easy for them to say, here's an African American, Latino male, went to New York City public schools, family in crisis. What chance does he have? But because they didn't give up on me, I'm standing here today. And like many of the students we worry most about, I am only able to be here because people gave me a meaningful second chance, because they invested in me. And so one of the reasons I'm so proud to be in this room with all of you is because when you look at our students that we work with, you see not the obstacles, but the opportunity, not the mistakes, but the possibility. You see the kind of hope that we need so desperately as a country. And if the last few weeks in this country haven't reminded us enough, we desperately need hope and commitment to possibility in our lives, to seeing what is possible in others, to seeing the best in others, and trying to create a society that is more just. And so thank you for being our fellow travelers in this work to build a more just society. Please be loud evangelists for this work. We've got to tell this story because it's a story about who we are as a country of second chances. Thanks so much.